Good morning. The passage before the sermon for today is from Revelation 13, from verse 11 to 18. Revelation 13, 11 to 18. The second beast. Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people, and by the signs that it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. Verse 15. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. Also, it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has a mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. Verse 18. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and its number is 666.
Thank you, Julius, for reading for us this morning. Welcome, everyone. It's good to be here with you this morning, and to welcome those of you who are visiting with us this morning. We're continuing our lessons from the book of Revelation, and this morning we come into chapter 13. And this is part of the section that we started last week that runs from chapter 12 to chapter 14, in which John is shown a series of signs or visions which have important lessons for John and his readers, showing the spiritual conflict that is going on behind the events that are taking place on earth. And last week we looked at the 3 signs or visions in chapter 12. There was the woman who is about to give birth to a child. There's the great red dragon waiting to devour the child when it's born. And then there's the war in heaven between Michael and the dragon. And the scene ends in chapter 12, verse 17, with the dragon standing on the seashore. And that really serves as a link to the next scene in chapter 13. In chapter 12, the dragon had failed to destroy the child and the woman. He has been defeated in heaven, and he's been cast down to the earth, where he now enlists the support of 2 allies or helpers, through whom he seeks to destroy God's purpose and God's people. The dragon's helpers are the 2 beasts who are described in chapter 13. In chapter 13, verses 1 to 10, there is a beast that rises from the sea. And in chapter 13, verses 11 to 18, as Julius read for us, there is the beast that comes up from the earth. John sees the first beast then rise out of the sea. What we have here is very similar to a vision that Daniel received, in which he saw 4 beasts coming up out of the sea. This is in Daniel chapter 7. The sea is a turbulent and an unstable environment. And in Daniel's vision, these 4 beasts coming out of the sea represented 4 human kingdoms or empires that were emerging from human society. The sea is sort of representative of the turbulent, unstable human society in which we live. Now, John describes the beast that he sees rising out of the sea as having 10 horns and 7 heads with 10 diadems upon its horns. The 10 horns represent the beast's power. The 7 heads represent its wisdom and its intelligence. The 10 diadems or crowns on its 10 horns represent the authority with which this beast rules over his domain. Back in chapter 12 and verse 3, we saw that the dragon also had 7 heads and 10 horns. But in the case of the dragon, the 7 diadems were on the 7 heads. With this beast, the diadems are on its 10 horns. And on the heads of this beast, we're told that there is a blasphemous name. So this beast is opposed to God. It wears a name that blasphemes or speaks against God. And it may in that reflect what was going on in the Roman Empire at this time, that many of the Roman emperors claimed to be gods, and they adopted names or titles which reflected their claims to deity. So they were bearing blasphemous names. John likens this beast that he sees to a leopard. It's a leopard, but it has feet like a bear's feet, and it has a mouth like a lion's mouth. This beast that John sees is really a combination of the first 3 beasts that Daniel saw in his vision in Daniel chapter 7. Daniel saw a lion, a bear, and a leopard. And those 3 seem to be combined in John's image here. The 4th beast that Daniel saw was, we're told, not like any other kind of beast. He couldn't identify it as any knowable creature. But like John's beast, it also had 10 horns. Again, that's in Daniel chapter 7. The 4th beast in Daniel's vision represented the Roman Empire. And the beast that John sees also represents the Roman Empire. And it's a composite picture of the other world empires that went before it, as if they're all combined into one. In John's day, it was the Roman Empire which manifested the forces that were opposed to God and his people. So the dragon here delegated its power, its throne, and its authority to this beast. So the power that is exercised by the Roman Empire has its origin in the dragon. And the dragon, as we've seen from chapter 12, is identified as Satan, as the devil. So satanic power is at work within the Roman Empire. And John observes that one of the beast's 7 heads seemed to have a mortal wound. So it looks, one of these heads is wounded. It looks as if it would be killed by this wound. It seemed to have a mortal wound, but we're told its mortal wound was healed. So the wound didn't kill it. And then the whole earth followed the beast with wonder. Some commentators identify this head with the mortal wound as the Roman Emperor Nero. And Nero was the first emperor to persecute Christians. When Nero died, the persecution of Christians ceased, but it would be revived under later emperors. Following the death of Nero, rumors circulated in the Roman Empire that he was going to return from the dead. And so here the world of the ungodly follow this beast, and they're filled with wonder over it. In verse 4, men are worshipping the dragon who gave his authority to the beast, and they're also worshipping the beast, saying, who is like the beast and who can fight against it? To those in the world, this beast seems to be invincible, and it's backed up by the power of the dragon, by Satan, and it's given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words. So that this beast claims to be divine, and it speaks boastfully against the true God. And the beast is allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. We've come across this figure before in chapters 11 and 12, 42 months, which is equivalent to 1,260 days or 3.5 years. So in chapter 11 and in chapter 12, those numbers are used as well. And as we said before, this period speaks of a limited period of time, a restricted period. So this beast's time is limited. It's going to come to an end. It speaks blasphemies against God, against his name and his dwelling place, and against those who dwell in heaven. So it is anti-God. And the true character of the beast is revealed as he speaks against God and his church. He is an enemy or an opponent of God and the church. And the beast is also allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. He's allowed to war against God's people. He doesn't exercise independent power. He can only do what God allows him to do. And God allows him to persecute the saints for this limited period of time, for this 42 months. And he is permitted in that time to have authority over every tribe and people and tongue and nation. The beast's influence and authority then is far-reaching, but it will ultimately come to an end. That's what we're told by the 42 months. And the beast will be worshipped by all those who dwell on the earth, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb that was slain. The book of life is the record of those who are faithful to God. It's mentioned in chapter 3 and verse 5, and later in chapter 20 and verse 15 as well. So people may be divided into two groups: those whose names are written in the book of life, and those whose names are not written in that book. And those whose names are not written in the book are here those who worship the beast. They give their allegiance to the beast. The names that are included in the book of life, we're told, have been written there before the foundation of the world. God knew before he created the world the names of those who would be faithful to him. Not that he predetermined them, but rather that he foreknew those who would be faithful. And the book is called the Book of Life of the Lamb that was slain. So it contains the names of those who have been saved by the blood of the Lamb, by the blood of Christ. And then those who have ears are called upon to hear. And we've come across that phrase before in the 7 letters to the 7 churches in chapters 2 and 3. Each letter ended with that sort of phrase, let him who has ears, let him hear what the Spirit says to the church. And that phrase is used here. So it's a call for people to have understanding. Listen to what is being said, understand it. And then he goes on in verse 10 to say, if anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone slays with the sword he must be slain. This may be talking about Christians who are to be taken captive or slain with the sword. They will have to accept what is to happen to them. Christians can expect to suffer under this beast. And the beast has been granted power to inflict suffering upon the people of God, and it will seem that the beast is victorious, that he's won. But the saints are called upon to endure and to remain faithful because God is in control. Verse 10 ends with this: here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. You've got to endure this. You've got to stay faithful. Well, John now sees a second beast in verses 11 to 18, and this one is rising out of the earth. First beast came out of the sea, remember. This one is rising out of the earth, indicating that it is of earthly origin. It's not from heaven. And this beast is described as having 2 horns like a lamb, but speaking like a dragon. So it has the appearance of being a gentle lamb, but it speaks with the ferociousness of a dragon. And the second beast exercises the same authority as the first beast, which came out of the sea. So like the first beast, the source of this second beast's authority is the dragon. They're all in it together. And the second beast's purpose is to make the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast. The beast from the earth is then encouraging this false worship. The false worship promoted by the beast here may perhaps take the form of emperor worship, which became widespread in the Roman Empire towards the end of the 1st century, at the time when John is writing this. or perhaps it's more generally referring to any other form of false religion or paganism of any kind. This beast from the earth can work great signs, including bringing down fire from heaven. And through these signs which it is allowed to work, it deceives those who dwell on the earth. So people are being taken in by these false signs. The danger of being deceived by those claiming to be able to perform signs or miracles was something that Jesus warned of in Matthew chapter 24, verse 24, where he said, "For false Christs and false prophets will arise and show great signs and wonders, so as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect." So Jesus warned that things like this will happen. And also Paul in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 9 warns that the coming of the lawless one by the activity of Satan will be with all power and pretended signs and wonders. The same kind of thing that Paul is speaking of there. The beast from the earth then calls upon those who dwell on the earth to make an image of the beast from the sea, the beast which was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And the beast from the earth is allowed to give breath to the image of the beast from the sea so that it even speaks. And those who refuse to worship the image of the beast are killed on the order of the beast from the earth. And if we think of this beast here representing Roman emperor worship, then this would be exactly what happened to Christians who refused to worship the image of the emperor. They would be put to death. The beast from the earth also causes all people, whatever their position or rank, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead. And the mark they're given is the name of the beast or the number of its name. Only those who are marked with the name or the number of the beast can then engage in doing business, in trade, in buying and selling. In John's time, those Christians who refused to worship the emperor would be discriminated against, and they would suffer economic hardship like this. So emperor worship was a test of loyalty, a test of a person's allegiance, and those who refused to get involved would suffer the consequences of that. We've seen then how God, in earlier chapters, God had marked his people with his name and the name of the Lamb in chapter 3 and chapter 7 and chapter 9 as well. So being marked with a name indicates to whom we belong. We spoke about this a bit in our Bible class this morning, of the Holy Spirit being the seal that God puts upon us as his mark of ownership. So to be marked with the name of God means that we belong to him, to bear that mark. To be marked with the name of the beast, though, means that we belong to the beast. Well, obviously, people don't bear literal physical marks on their foreheads or their hands to indicate to whom they belong. This is symbolic language. And although we do not bear a physical, visible mark on our bodies, we do make known to whom we belong by the type of life that we live, by our behavior and by our worship and by our service. So who is our Lord? And who do we serve? And how do we show that in our lives? To whom do we belong? In verse 18, John calls for wisdom so that we might understand the number of this beast. And John says, for it is a human number. Its number is 666. People who may not know anything about the book of Revelation have no doubt heard of the number 666 and wondered what it meant. Many different ideas have been suggested to try to explain the meaning of this number. And one idea is that the number is some sort of code in which numbers represent letters of the alphabet, the Greek alphabet or the Hebrew alphabet. And then decoding the numbers will produce the name. The most common name suggested using this method is the name Nero, the Emperor Nero. But this name is arrived at by all sorts of contortions, And really, any other name can be found by manipulating the numbers and trying to fit it in with who you think it might be. So it's very unlikely that the number represents one particular person. The number is the number of the name of the first beast which came out of the sea, we're told. And John says this number is a human number, or the New International Version, it's man's number. So the number represents something which is human, something which is of human origin. And as we've been seeing, numbers in the book of Revelation are important symbols. The number 7, which is common throughout the book, represents perfection or completeness. The number 6 is one short of 7. So 6 represents imperfection or incompleteness, falling short. And then tripling the number to 666 would emphasize continuing or ongoing imperfection. It's imperfect 3 times over. So the number 666 is the number of the beast which came out of the sea, and the beast which came out of the sea represented human kingdoms under the control and the influence of Satan. In John's time, that was the Roman Empire. So 666 symbolizes the complete and utter failure and imperfection of all human kingdoms or political systems. Just as throughout history we see the rise and fall of kingdoms and empires and governments and civilizations, that none of these human kingdoms or empires are perfect. So by using the number 666, the Christians in John's time are being shown that their opponents are human. They're not eternal. And the beast from the earth represents the encouragement of false religion and false worship within those human kingdoms. It's about the worship of human power. So the two beasts, the beast from the sea and the beast from the earth, then would represent the cooperation between the anti-Christian political state and state-sponsored anti-Christian religion, both of which are under the influence of the dragon, Satan. That's how he works, through these institutions. For John's original readers, then, the two beasts would represent the political and the religious power of the Roman Empire. John shows the source of that power and authority and how it is being exercised against Christians. It is the abuse of power. God delegates power to our governing authorities, but that power is to be used responsibly, and those who abuse that power are doing the work of Satan. What John and his readers experienced and what they witnessed at that time is something that has repeated itself throughout human history. That political and religious power is often exercised for personal ends and for selfish interests, and not for the common good. And as Christians, we live in a world and we live under a political system that is not always sympathetic towards Christian values and standards. In some parts of the world, Christians face real persecution and the threat of death. In Western democracies, we see the ongoing erosion of moral standards of right and wrong as the influence of the Bible on society diminishes. Being a Christian in the world today is not easy, but there again, it never has been, and Jesus never promised that it would be. The two beasts that John saw here still exist, and they still manifest themselves in our political and our religious institutions and systems today. There are still forces that are at work that are opposed to God and his word and his people. That's the spirit of these beasts that John sees here. But there are two key verses in this chapter 13, which would give us encouragement. The first of these is in verse 10, where John says, "If anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone slays with the sword he must be slain. Here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. We may not be able to change things that are happening in the world. We may not have much political influence in the world. But whatever happens, whatever difficult circumstances we may have to face, we must endure and we must remain faithful to God. That God calls us to endure and to remain faithful to him, whatever is going on, whatever the world may do to us. Here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. And the second verse to give us encouragement is verse 18. This calls for wisdom. Let him who has understanding reckon the number of the beast, for it is a human number. Its number is 666. So whatever these terrifying beasts represent, or whatever it is they can do, they're only human. They're less than perfect. They are not all powerful. God is the one who is perfect. God is the one with perfect power, and he is the one that we are called upon to trust. Don't be afraid of the beasts. Don't have nightmares tonight. Trust in God, because God is in control. Amen.